It's time to play with Nick Jr. When kids play Blues Clues, they clue into early math and literacy skills, learn ways to solve problems, and collect the learning tools they need to get ready for kindergarten. You're playing with Nick Jr. When your kids race with Blaze and his friends, they'll speed off on monster-sized problem-solving missions using science, technology, engineering, and math skills to save the day. Let's blaze. When kids join Ben and Holly in their enchanted little kingdom, they learn about perseverance, teamwork, and friendship, and discover big adventure in the tiniest of places. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When kids swim with the Bubble Guppies, they dive into a curriculum of literacy, math, science, and the arts, and gain skills that will get them ready for school. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When kids explore with Dino Dan, they discover the world of dinosaurs through scientific observation and technology, while having adventures of prehistoric proportions. It's time to play with Nick Jr. Every time kids explore with Dora, they expand their observation and problem-solving skills and learn about Spanish language and culture, all while mapping out a major adventure. When your kids go into the city with Dora and friends, they learn to work together to solve problems, engage in bilingual conversation, and discover different ways that they can help within their own community. Todos juntos. It's time to play with Nick Jr. While they're palling around with Franklin and friends, kids learn social skills while gaining the confidence to come out of their shells. It's time to play with Nick Jr. Rockin' with the Fresh Beat Band encourages kids to make music and express themselves through dance and movement, all while jamming to the freshest beats. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When your kids spy it up with the Fresh Beat Band of spies, they learn about friendship and teamwork, while developing rockin' problem-solving skills. It's time to play with Nick Jr. While they're palling around with Franklin and friends, kids learn social skills while gaining the confidence to come out of their shells. It's time to play with Nick Jr. On every Diego rescue mission, kids learn about tools and technology for scientific study, gain observation skills, and get up close and personal with animals of all kinds. When your little ones earn their badges with Dougie, they'll solve problems with trial and error, use creativity and cooperation, and discover the world around them. Isn't it time for Dougie? It's time to play with Nick Jr. When kids groove with Jack and friends, they expand their awareness of musical instruments and styles and rock out to a music appreciation curriculum. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When kids play in La La Loopsy Land, they discover the importance of building friendships and working together to solve problems. They also learn to appreciate diversity in the world around them. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When kids defend Glen Dragon with Mike the Knight, they're developing social and emotional skills, including cooperation, trying their best, and doing the right thing. Huzzah! It's time to play with Nick Jr. Miss Spider and her little buggies encourage kids to embrace the diversity of the world around them, discover nature, and be kind to creatures, big and small. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When your kids visit Mutt and Stuff, they'll discover how to care for dogs and other pets, while learning to appreciate and understand the needs of all living things. When your kids go on an adventure with Miffy, they'll learn to explore their own world in a new way and discover that solving problems involves asking questions, handling frustrations, and learning from mistakes. Let's play with Miffy. It's time to play with Nick Jr. While hopping around with Max and Ruby, kids learn to recognize and handle their own feelings and those of the people around them, even their little brothers. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When kids play with Kai Lan, they're encouraged to recognize and cope with their feelings and explore Chinese culture and language, all while enjoying the benefits of close friendship and the occasional dumpling. It's time to play with Nick Jr. Every time kids visit Big City with Oswald and friends, they enter a whimsical world in which they can develop problem-solving, interpersonal, and early literacy skills. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When kids play with Olivia, they get to spend time thinking creatively, using their problem-solving skills, and dreaming up an awesome adventure. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When kids hop into adventures with Peter Rabbit, they learn problem solving, key social skills, and the importance of perseverance. They might even develop a love of carrots. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When your kids are on a mission with the Paw Patrol, they develop valuable social skills like teamwork, build problem-solving abilities, and learn to be a helpful part of their community. Time to play with Nick Jr. Pocoyo helps kids expand their social and emotional development, learn the power of curiosity, and discover how things work in the world around them. It's time to play with Nick Jr. Each play date with Peppa Pig encourages kids to expand their social and emotional development and explore the diversity of the world around them.
Com Regal Academy, as crianças aprendem a importância dos estudos, de comportar-se com bons modos e que a diversão com os amigos é a melhor de todos os mundos.
Time to play with Nick Jr. When your kids spend time with Shimmer and Shine, they'll learn to be resilient and to encourage and support one another. What more could you wish for? It's time to play with Nick Jr. When your kids spend time with Tommy and Tallulah, they're learning important social skills like helping friends, sharing ideas, and cooperating to solve problems just in the nick of time. It's time to play with Nick Jr. On every mighty math mission with Team Umizoomi, kids gain early math skills like counting, sorting, measuring, and shape identification. They also learn that there's power in numbers. It's time to play with Nick Jr. Every adventure with the Backyardigans introduces kids to the richness of the world's music and dance traditions while helping them master some major moves. When kids go on a journey with Toot and Puddle, they're introduced to geographical words and concepts, as well as the diversity of the world around them. It's time to play with Nick Jr. While they're laughing along with Wubsy, kids are discovering the importance of kindness, cooperation, social interactions, and wub-tastic friendships. It's time to play with Nick Jr. While they're saving the day with the Wonder Pets, kids are developing early reading skills, building musical awareness, and of course, learning the power of teamwork. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When your kids play with Wally, they build important early literacy skills, including letter and sound identification, rhyming, and vocabulary development. Now those are some magic words. It's time to play with Nick Jr. Getting Down with the GABA Gang introduces kids to important social skills and body awareness, plus funky dance moves. It's time to play with Nick Jr. When your kids go on a pop-up adventure with Zach and Quack, they'll learn problem-solving skills while developing creativity and imagination.